Hello, viewers. Welcome back. I hope all of you are doing well and enjoying the T20 series between India and England. But today's episode is primarily for connoisseurs, the ones who follow the game in depth. I'm going to talk about the greatest batsmen ever to have played this game, primarily focusing on Test cricket because that is the real thing. Let's jump straight into it. Firstly, the caveat is I'm restricting this conversation to only those who are part of the 10,000 run club, which means that the likes of Sir Donald Bradman, Sir Garfield Sobers, etc., are not part of this list. The three Ws, Javed Miandad, there are a lot of great players across eras, even the likes of Virat Kohli, Virender Sehwag, Kane Williamson, etc., are not part of this club. Hence, this conversation is restricted to the ones who have achieved the 10,000 run mark. Steve Smith is the latest entrant. He ended on 9,999, if you remember, in the last test versus India. So he's just crossed that milestone with a magnificent 100 in Sri Lanka, a match which Australia won comprehensively by an innings. Now, if you look at this list and you look at the averages, it is the averages of these players at the time they reached the 10,000 run mark and not what they ended up with. So Ricky Ponting ended up with somewhere around 52. Sachin ended up with somewhere around 53. So this is the average of these players when they hit the 10,000 run mark. Kumar Sangakkara is an exception. I think he ended up with somewhere around 56 or 57. So these are some of the all-time greats that we're looking at here. And it is obviously an extremely difficult job to narrow down on the top five from here. But I have certain criteria basis which I have made that selection. First, let me just, and while I come to that, I will discuss the top five in detail. But before that, let me just discuss some of the other names here, starting with Alistair Cook, or Sir Alistair Cook, as he's been knighted now. So Alistair Cook was a very, very good player. He's had some wonderful knocks across countries, but as his average of 46 reflects, he wasn't as consistent. He wasn't the most gifted in any case. His strike rate wasn't the best, but he was a resolute batsman. And I remember the Gabba test in the 2011 Ashes, which England went on to win. Um, and Alistair Cook was one of the main reasons. I mean, after getting bowled out cheaply, England batted on and on. They scored about 500 for two, which completely broke Australia's back, and they went on to win. England went on to win a famous series in Australia. So he's had memorable moments across the globe. He has a good record all across. It's just that he's not somebody who could be categorized as a great batsman, but he was a very, very good batsman. Then you of course have Joe Root, who is part of the Fab Four that we call these days, along with Kane Williamson, Virat Kohli, and Steve Smith. Now, Joe Root was is again an extraordinary story. He was well behind the other three out of the Fab Four a couple of years ago, but he scored tons and tons of runs in the last couple of years. He's become more aggressive under the baseball era, and he's taken his game to the next level. Whereas Virat Kohli's average has dropped from somewhere around mid 50s to the mid 40s. Joe Root's average has been on the rise. However, I still don't rate him as highly as some of the all-time greats, primarily because of his poor record in Australia. He doesn't have a great record in South Africa either, and hence it would be difficult for me to bracket him along with the all-time greats who've performed across conditions. And but let's see where his career ends up. It could well end up above Sachin. Because he is still young, and England play a lot of test matches every year, and that means that he may well end up as the leading run getter in Test cricket by the time he finishes. And once he does that, given the amount of ODI and T20 cricket these days, I don't see anyone breaking that record if he gets there. So another all-time great. Then you have Shiv Narayan Chanderpaul, a very, very underrated cricketer. He carried the West Indies around for a long, long time, even after Brian Lara's retirement. Now, Shiv Narayan Chanderpaul came into the West Indies team in about the mid 1990s when they were still a very, very good team. And by the time he ended in the mid 2000s, 2010s, West Indies was well on its way down. They were a declining force. Yet he stood up and he scored runs across the globe. Again, an average of 50 is fantastic for somebody who's played over 120, 130 test matches. Um, Again, a workhorse, just like Alistair Cook. Not somebody who could take the game away from you, but somebody who would persevere. Not the most attractive of batsmen. He had a unique technique, which anybody who's watched him would understand. But whatever he did, he found a way, and he scored a lot of runs across the globe. A great record at home, not the greatest of records outside of home because he had trouble in swinging conditions as well as bouncy pitches, but still he managed to score tons and tons of runs. And kudos to him for ending up in this list. Um, then comes Mahela Jayawardene. Mahela Jayawardene, again, a great player at home, a decent player outside Sri Lanka. He was extremely good in subcontinent. On spinning pitches, he was a master. He was excellent in pitches which didn't have a lot of bounce. He struggled a little bit in the Sena countries, South Africa, England, New Zealand, and Australia, unlike his counterpart, Kumar Sangakkara, who had very good success in those countries. So, but a brilliant player. He had that mammoth partnership with Sangakkara against South Africa, scored tons and tons of runs against India as well at home. A very, very good player, very pleasing to watch. He is one of the most the languid players that Sri Lanka has produced, and very easy on the eye. Um, then you have Yunus Khan, again, a very, very underrated cricketer. If you talk about Pakistani cricketers, you probably think of Mohammad Yusuf, or you talk about Inzamamul Haq. And if you go back in time, the likes of Hanif Mohammad, or you obviously Javed Miandad. But nobody talks about Yunus Khan. Yunus Khan ended up scoring over 10,000 runs, and a lot of his runs came uh, post he turned 30, and he scored runs across the globe. Again, one of the reasons for me not rating him as highly as some of the others is because he struggled in key matches in conditions like Australia, South Africa, bouncy pitches, but he did score a lot of runs, and he held Pakistan cricket together for a long time. Post Yunus Khan and Misbah-ul Haq, Pakistan cricket declined, particularly in Test cricket, because they have never been able to become a good Test side since those retirements. Pakistan, in fact, if you recall, Yunus Khan was also the captain of Pakistan when they won the 2009 T20 World Cup. He led from the front. He kept the pressure away from the group. He kept insisting that they were just there to enjoy the tournament. Eventually, ended up winning it. So, yeah, coming back to the list, Jack Callis is the next. I mean, he's an absolute legend of the game in a league of his own. He's as good as Garfield Sobers when it comes to all-round skills. Uh, Purely as a batsman, he scored almost as many runs as Rahul Dravid, or obviously a little lesser than Sachin Tendulkar, but tons and tons of runs across the globe. He didn't have the best of records in England. That was probably his only sort of blot in his career. But having said that, I mean, he held South African batting together for a very, very long time. Till Hashim Amla came in, I think he was the mainstay, because they didn't have a great batsman in their lineup. I mean, South Africa have always had great bowlers and great all-rounders, but if you were to pick one truly great batsman, it was Jack Callis. Like I said, till Hashim Amla and AB de Villiers came along and started contributing a little later in the piece. Carlos again was not as flamboyant as some of the others in this list. He was a workman. a workhorse for the team, and he had to work hard for his runs. Not somebody who would dominate attacks, but again. Somebody who would score runs under crisis. Out of this list, there would be very few who would have scored more hundreds under pressure than Jack Callis. I remember India would have won the Test series in South Africa. It would have been a historic win for India in 2010, if not for Callis in the last Test match. He saved them the blushes, and that's not the only occasion. There have been a number of occasions, home and away, when he stood up when the chips were down. Uh, Moving on, it is the wall, Rahul Dravid. Now, Dravid is somebody who is rated extremely highly by people outside India as well as in India, but especially in India, because they know the contributions that he made to Indian cricket. I mean, a lot of people rate him at par or even higher than Sachin. Um, there are very good reasons to do so. It obviously would be uh, a big debate comparing the two legends of the game. I wouldn't be against anybody who says that Dravid probably contributed more than Sachin in Test cricket. Indian fans especially would remember some of the great knocks played by Dravid. Uh, I remember uh, a brilliant 100 in South Africa in 1997, but India had already lost the Test series by then. Sachin and Azhar had a brilliant partnership in the second Test match after India were just pummeled in the first one, where they were bowled out for 66 and 100. In the third Test, Dravid showed his credentials. He had already done well in England along with Saurav Ganguly. Um, then came he had a poor tour of Australia in 1999. However, he bounced back brilliantly in 2003. He obviously had that historic partnership with VVS Lakshman at the Eden Gardens, the greatest Test match ever, arguably. But in 2003 in Adelaide um, uh, is when he made a big name for himself by scoring that brilliant double hundred and also winning India the match. Sachin was struggling in that series, and the way Dravid took up the mantle along with Lakshman, the huge partnership in the first innings in Adelaide, followed by a match-winning unbeaten knock in the second, um, was a famous win for India. He did the same again. He in Pakistan. In fact, he captained the first two Test matches when Ganguly wasn't there, and he did really well there. He went on to scored many such great hundreds overseas, which obviously are which Indians remember really well. I remember him playing a crucial knock in Perth in 2008 when India had that famous win after the Monkey Gate scandal. Even in 2011 in England, where the entire Indian batting lineup struggled, he was the only one who scored three brilliant hundreds, and that was no mean feat. Now, the only reason why I rate Sachin above Dravid is because of his impeccable record in South Africa and Australia, which is superior to that of Dravid's. I mean, Dravid obviously had some great knocks there, but Sachin was much more at ease in those conditions. I mean, like I said, I mean, anybody could argue between the two, but both will go down as legends of the game. If I were to purely compare him with Sachin, what Sachin did better was again his record against the likes of Australia, Pakistan at home, where he played some brilliant magical knocks. Not that Dravid was far behind, like I said. It's just that if I were to do a comparison, Sachin would uh, probably be slightly ahead. I mean, Dravid also became a big contributor to India in ODI cricket, but that's a discussion for another episode. The fact that he ended up over 10,000 runs was absolutely fantastic. I remember some of his great partnerships with his good friend VVS Lakshman. I mean, they would go on and bat for hours together, scoring 300 plus partnerships. I mean, that's not easy. India would dearly love to have those partnerships in today's day and age. Obviously, his contributions as captain was also pretty good. I mean, he ended up winning a Test series in West Indies as a captain. Now, let me move on to my top five. And top of that list, and a lot of you may debate on it is Sunil Gavaskar. I rate Sunil Gavaskar higher than Sachin and a lot of others in this list, primarily because of his extraordinary record against the great West Indies team in the 70s and 80s. He also had phenomenal records in all the other countries, like you can see here. I mean, the barometer for me when it comes to judging great batsmen is their away record. Now, in Gavaskar's case, his record home and away were brilliant. In those days, playing at home wasn't easy as well, especially as an opener, and with the kind of dependency that India had on him, he stood up. I mean, his hundreds in the 70 series and the 71, 72 series versus England and versus West Indies and England, where India got famous series wins, are stuff of legends. Gavaskar was an inspiration not just for Indians but any opener. He was the first batsman ever to score 10,000 test runs. He was a master of fourth innings chases. I mean, fourth innings chases are the most difficult because of the pressure that you face. But Gavaskar went on to achieve great things in the fourth innings. He had a mind boggling record against the great West Indian team. He still holds the record for the highest number of test centuries as an opener. I mean, very few have been as strong against pace and spin as Gavaskar. I mean, he played in an era where there were no helmets, and to face the likes of Richard Hadley, Imran Khan, the great West Indian quartet, Ian Botham, you need nerves of steel to stand up as an opener and face those guys, especially when India was a team which had a very poor record overseas. India didn't have fast bowlers, so often they would get pitches which were fast and bouncy because the opposition would have great fast bowlers, and India's strength was spin. That also added to the misery for Gavaskar, but he stood up, and he stood up to be counted. I mean, some of his great knocks, if you look at it, came across the globe. He scored 102 against the West Indies in the Port of Spain in 1976, and that was in the fourth innings. India won that match. He scored a monumental 221 against England in what would go down as one of the greatest test matches in the history of the game in 1979, when India almost pulled off a chase of almost 440. They ended up at 429, just 9 runs short of a great win. Gavaskar was very upset that towards the end, the batsman didn't go for the win. The match was eventually a draw. Then there was the 220 versus the West Indies in the Port of Spain in his debut series, in which he scored 774 runs, including twin centuries in the final test match to ensure that India won the series 1-0. I mean, those are the kind of feats that are not likely to be repeated. He had this 236 not out against the West Indies in Chennai in 1983, and one of his great knocks was the 96 against Pakistan in Bengaluru in 1987. Towards the end of his career, India lost that heartbreaking match by 14 runs on a very very difficult pitch, but Gavaskar stood up like a rock. And I could go on and on. 113 versus Australia in Brisbane in 1977. You take all kinds of wickets, and Gavaskar could score runs. That is the legacy that he left behind. He inspired a generation of cricketers, the likes of Sanjay Manjrekar, Sachin, anyone that you can think of in the 80s and 90s was inspired by Gavaskar. So he is someone, in my opinion, underrated, probably because he's remembered for his one-day skills, but he was the greatest Test batsman I've seen. Or I should rather say, I haven't seen him play live. He's the only one of the top five that I've chosen that I haven't seen live, but he will definitely go down as the greatest, in my opinion. The second in the list is Stephen Smith, the great Aussie batsman with a completely unorthodox technique. Obviously, I have seen him play, and I have seen him score tons of runs against everyone. And his record is extraordinary. I mean, he for a long time he was averaging well above 60. And very few have done that in the history of the game. There are a couple who have. I think it is George Headley and Barry Richards, etc. But they played very few Test matches. for somebody who's had such a long career and someone who started off as a predominantly as a spin bowler, Steve Smith has developed into one of the all-time greats. And the way he revives himself every time he seems to be down and out is the story of legends. He's scored the best thing about Steve Smith is that he scores runs when it is most crucial. I've said this about Virat Kohli. Virat Kohli doesn't have a great record in the semi-finals and finals of ODI tournaments. Similarly, Virat Kohli doesn't have a great record in the two World Test Championship finals that he played. Steve Smith is just the opposite. He scores big runs when it matters. He scored 100 against India in the ODI semi-final. He scored a brilliant 100 in the World Test Championship final against India, along with Travis Head, which took them to victory. He scores runs when it matters. He scored runs all around the world. If you leave his record against Bangladesh, he averages above 50 almost everywhere. South Africa is a place where I'm sure if he plays test matches, he will improve. South Africa and Australia have a problem, a bilateral problem, so they don't play test matches in each other's countries anymore. But there is the World Test Championship final against South Africa that's coming up. So he's scored runs everywhere. His biggest strength is, despite having an unorthodox technique, he stands very still at the time he meets the ball, and he's very resolute. I mean, after the sandpaper gate scandal that happened in 2018 in South Africa, people thought that his career would be finished, but he came back after a couple of years and came back with a vengeance. Similarly, when he was playing the series against India, he started off very poorly, but then he rode back towards the end, and now he's gone and scored a century in Sri Lanka in the first Test match. His prowess against spin is excellent. For an Aussie, he plays spin really, really well. He did well when he was in India last time. And he's a very smart captain as well. I mean, he's the current captain in Sri Lanka. He did really well in the Ashes as well last time. So he's been a backbone. The other thing about Steve Smith is, like much like Sachin, there is a lot that depends on him. So Australia have not had the greatest of players supporting him, which is another feather in his cap. Third in this list is my personal favorite, Sachin Tendulkar. Sachin remains my favorite of all time, my all-time favorite. But if I were to look at it from a practical lens, I would rate him just behind Steven Smith and Sunil Gavaskar. In terms of record, there is no matching Sachin. I mean, 15,000 plus runs everywhere. Brilliant record in Australia, in South Africa, which very few have. If you look at the greats of the game, they struggle in these two countries. Virat Kohli has a great record, but if you see the likes of Joe Root and a lot of other great players from Pakistan, from the subcontinent, or even from England, struggle in these two countries because of the bounce. But Sachin took to these countries as if he was born and brought up there. I remember every one of his hundreds. Like I said, I'm a huge fan. In his first tour to Australia, he scored a couple of hundreds. Then again in '99, when the entire team was failing around him, he played brilliant knocks. He got 3 or 4 horrible decisions, yet he ended up as the man of the series because I guess the Aussies were guilty. In 2003, he struggled for the most part, but then came the 241 not out in the final test, which was stuff of legends. For somebody like Sachin to completely give up offside play and focus only on balls coming around the leg stump and score 240 runs is extraordinary. I mean, that is something that Virat Kohli should learn from, giving up of his ego. He had, again, Sachin's knocks in England in 1990 in his first series there. He looked extremely comfortable, and thereafter he always did well, except for his last series where he was obviously towards the last leg of his career. I've seen him play some wonderful knocks in New Zealand as well. In 2009, India ended up winning a series there where he played really, really well. In South Africa in '97, along with Azhar, when Nelson Mandela was at the ground, he played that brilliant knock, finally caught of Adam Barker. It was a great catch. But apart from that, I mean, again in 2010, when India drew the series 1-1, it was Sachin who held fort. every time he toured Pakistan, he toured them as a kid. At that time, he was obviously, and that's why his record is probably his average is around 40, because he had a few failures there as a 16-year-old. But when he went back there, he scored a magnificent 194 not out, the controversial one where Dravid declared. But he played the knock that I remember versus Pakistan was the one in Chennai when India were chasing 273 and Sachin almost won it for them. That was a heartbreaking loss for India. Just like Gavaskar 12 years ago, it was a masterclass in the fourth innings where he almost took India to victory, 136, and the bowlers, all that the bowlers had to do was score about 12 to 15 runs, which they couldn't manage. Sachin had back spasms, and he tried to hit Saklin over the top, and Saklin's dusra got him. Otherwise, that would have been a great win for India. But like I said, I mean, Sachin is much more than just stats. He is revered as almost as a god in India, and rightly so, because for a decade or so, he carried India on his shoulders till the arrival of Ganguly, Dravid, and Lakshman. And uh, how much ever you praise him, it's not enough. I mean, for me, his straight drive, his pull shots, the pull shot of Caddick in the 2003 World Cup is something that I can never forget. Obviously, Sachin's ODI record is also brilliant, but I'm talking only about Test batsmanship here. And Sachin was par for the course, or rather better than par for the course wherever he played. There is his legendary rivalry versus Shane Warne, where he hit Shane Warne when he was bowling from outside leg stump on the rough, and he hit him straight over the head. Shane Warne went on to say that he got nightmares of Sachin hitting him over the head. Brilliant player of spin as well. You see some of the modern day greats struggle against spin. Sachin never had that issue. One thing that Sachin would have liked would have been more wins in his knocks. I mean, if I remember the knock against England in 2008 when Viru and Gambhir set up the 387 chase, but he would have wanted a lot more wins under his belt. But all said and done, one of the greatest of all time. Talking of greats, Steve Waugh is number 4 in my list. He was another legend. I mean, Steve Waugh was known for his fighting ability. Again, look at his record: average of 74 in England. I mean, for an Aussie to average 74 is crazy. An average of 47 in India, a very good average in Pakistan. In those days, an average of 40, 45 plus in the subcontinent was considered brilliant. Again, a very good record in South Africa. He had a bit of a tough time in whatever matches he played in Sri Lanka. But if you look at again the West Indies, West Indies was a very good team with Curtly Ambrose, Courtney Walsh, Malcolm Marshall before that, and he averaged almost 70 there. So Steve Waugh always scored the tough runs. He was known as the Iceman for his ability to stay calm under pressure. Everybody would remember the 1999 World Cup where Australia were down and out, and he won the match for them against South Africa, and then obviously led them to victory as a captain. But Steve was, like I said, he's always known for his toughness. I mean, he never had the natural ability that his brother Mark Waugh possessed. So Mark Waugh was always known as somebody who was elegant. He could people would pay to watch Mark Waugh bat, but Steve Waugh was tough as nails. He was dropped in the late 80s. And Mark Waugh was the one who replaced him incidentally, but he came back. He had the famous rivalry against Curtly Ambrose, where they almost exchanged blows. But every time you would write Australia off, you would do it at your own peril because Steve O was around. In fact, India would have won the series 2-1 in Australia in 2003 in the test in which Sachin scored the 241 not out. Australia had a mammoth target in the fourth innings, and they just about survived with Steve Waugh having that partnership with Jason Gillespie. So he was the one. He was the go-to man for Australia whenever they were in trouble. he always rose to the occasion, just like the final test in the 1995 series. West Indies hadn't lost a series for 20 years, and that came to an end at the hands of Australia. And Steve Waugh was the man. He, along with Mark Waugh, forged a big partnership in the final test in Jamaica, where Steve scored 200, and West Indies had scored about 265 in the first innings. Australia went on to score 500 plus, with Steve Waugh leading the charge, and then West Indies crumbled in the second. So it was a major landmark, not just for Australian cricket but also for world cricket. And West Indies. That was the end of the West Indian era, or the great West Indian team. And that's the kind of impact that Steve Waugh had. I mean, he always went on to score the big runs in the big games. Number 5 on the list is, again, one of my personal favorites, Brian Charles Lara. Brian Lara is rated as the greatest of his era by a lot of his peers. If you ask the likes of Glenn McGrath and the late Shane Warne, a lot of the others, they would probably rate Lara higher than Sachin. But I have my reasons to rate Sachin above him. I'll explain that. So if you look at his record, again, he had a brilliant overall record, especially in the West Indies, where he averaged almost 60. His record wasn't as great overseas as someone like a Sachin. I mean, his average in India wasn't great, even though he didn't play a lot of matches. He struggled a bit in some of the other countries as well, but like New Zealand, for instance. But whenever he scored those runs, he scored magnificent runs. I mean, you would pay to watch Brian Lara bat. The 277 in Australia, for instance, was something that the Aussies remember even today. But having said that, a lot of his runs in Australia came when the series was almost lost, and that's why I rate Sachin higher. But like I said, Brian Lara is somebody who could dominate bowling attacks, especially in the West Indies. He had some great battles, like the 1999 series, where he led West Indies to victory. And there was the famous one-wicket win where he, along with Courtney Walsh, helped them cross the line. He scored tons and tons of runs in Sri Lanka against the great Muttiah Muralidharan. I mean, you look at his average of 100 in Sri Lanka, and that was one series where he completely dominated Muralidharan, where everybody else struggled, including the great Indian the Fab Four struggled against Muttiah in Sri Lanka, but Lara was up for it. I mean, again, like Sachin and Steve Smith, was almost a loner. He had to fight a lone battle, even though he had Shivnarayan Chanderpaul for company. It was almost the entire pressure was on his shoulders. He scored that magnificent 400 not out, which is still a world record, against England. A great player, great to watch. And his cut and pull and whatnot. I mean, Lara is somebody who is still revered across the globe. I mean, people pay to watch his highlights. So he's that kind of a player. The other thing was his ability to score big hundreds. I mean, look at the number of double hundreds. He has a double hundred in about 4 or 5 countries that he played, and that was a brilliant ability. The 216 against Pakistan came in 2006 when he clobbered Danish Kaneria all over the park. Similarly, the 221 in Sri Lanka, like I said, he dominated them. 200 in South Africa. No contemporary player, or in fact, players from the past, have so many double hundreds across countries. For more such news, especially on Indian cricket, do read my book, Indian Cricket: Why Good Will Never Be Great. The title might be a little misleading. The book praises Indian cricket to the hilt, but at the same time, it also brings out a lot of aspects of Indian cricket which need to improve. India, in my opinion, has all the resources, has all the money, has a lot of talent, but yet we are nowhere when it comes to being a great cricket team. Not in the same league as the great West Indian cricket team of the past or the Australian cricket team of the 90s and 2000s. India should be a team which should win almost every tournament. Look at the kind of, like I said, resources that we have. What we need to do is invest a lot in mental strength, mental strength is something that wins you matches. Physical ability is obviously there, but there are a lot of aspects in Indian cricket which need to be re-looked at. My book is primarily aimed at educating Indian viewers about the great feats that Indian cricket and cricketers have achieved over the years, and at the same time, the improvement areas. It talks a lot about the Indian cricket fan. Who, in my opinion, are the reason why India is not successful. If you look at fans in Australia, England, etc., they criticize their team. Constructive criticism is critical to success, and in India, fans are revered by the cricketers are revered so much by fans that they hardly get criticized. If you look at some of the recent crop, the likes of Rohit Sharma, Virat Kohli, they've been failing for a very long time, but fans don't like it if you criticize them. There is so much talent. There are at least 10 to 20 million good cricketers in this country, given the population that we have, and given that amount of talent pool, we should be doing a lot better than we've done so far. You can get this book; it is available at Amazon. And also, please subscribe to my channel. I would love to hear comments. Please drop comments below. I would want to hear your views on this episode and the top five that I've chosen. Please share your opinion freely. I would want a debate and not just a one-way conversation. Thank you so much.